Right now, we're paying sometimes 10 times higher than other nations. So we have favored nations. That's been approved. Other nations have, for the most part, agreed to it. And they had no choice. Otherwise, we were going to put tariffs on them.
Look, everyone, we need to look directly at what's happening right now because it is absolutely insane. We are in 2026. And if you thought the most shocking rhetoric was behind us, this impromptu interview with Donald Trump outside the White House is a massive wake-up call. Let's focus on the most critical issue, NATO and the island of Greenland. This isn't some real estate joke from 2019 anymore. It has spiraled into a full-blown geopolitical crisis that threatens the very survival of the most important military alliance in human history. Picture a scenario where the President of the United States, the leader of NATO, refuses to commit to not using military force against his own strategic partners. Yes, you heard that right. In the clip I'm about to show you, NBC's Vaughn Hilliard asks a pointed and vital question. What's the context here? Denmark, Sweden, France, and Germany have just deployed military forces, warships, and fighter jets to Greenland to establish a defensive perimeter. Why are they doing this? Because they're terrified. They're afraid that the U.S. military under Trump's direction could carry out a forceful seizure if these buy and sell negotiations go nowhere. To show you the clearest evidence of this dangerous ambiguity, take a look at this clip.
Does he commit to not militarily engaging NATO partners? And he said, I'm not talking about that. I followed up by asking, are you then not committing to not attacking NATO countries? And that's when he waved me aside. I think that that is an important element here on this Friday to note that the President of the United States here in 2020.
You see, instead of the simple, yes, of course we won't attack an ally, Trump chooses to say we're going to see and pivots to how NATO has been dealing with us on Greenland. This is classic, a textbook example of trying to normalize the unthinkable. Trump is using terms like national security and this so-called Golden Dome as a smokescreen for blatant territorial expansion. He's calling Greenland a big hole in our defense. But here's the reality. Greenland belongs to Denmark, a founding member of NATO. Under Article 5, an attack on one is an attack on all. And yet here we have an American president waffling on whether he'd attack our own brothers in arms. This is incredibly dangerous because it sends a disastrous signal to the rest of the world. If the United States won't commit to protecting its allies, or worse, becomes the threat itself, what is even the point of NATO European nations like France and Germany are now staring at a grim reality they can no longer rely on the American nuclear umbrella? Denmark deploying troops to Greenland isn't a drill, it's a desperate message to Washington. We will defend our sovereignty even if the enemy is you. Trump even mentioned that other countries had no choice but to cave to his demands or face massive tariffs. He's blending economic blackmail with military intimidation. This isn't how a leader of the free world behaves. This is how a global bully acts on the international stage. Taking Greenland by force or through military coercion would mean the absolute end of the rules-based international order we spent decades building since World War II. We need to wake up and realize that every time Trump rants about military greatness or how America is stronger than ever, he's often using that power against the very people who should be our partners. His silence, his refusal to rule out attacking NATO, is a massive red flag. It reveals an authoritarian mindset that treats international law like a joke and is willing to torch lifelong alliances for a personal geopolitical ego trip. Don't let the national security buzzwords fool you. This is a pure power grab that is isolating the US like never before. And that's just the beginning of this unhinged interview. If you think the NATO stuff was enough, just wait until we break down how he's literally inventing Nobel Prizes for himself in the next segment. But first, burn this image into your brain. American allies are arming themselves to defend against America. That is the legacy of Trump's 2026 foreign policy. Now brace yourselves for something so ridiculous it feels like it's ripped straight out of a cheap satire. But unfortunately, this is the reality we're living in here in 2026. Donald Trump has a chronic pathological obsession with the Nobel Peace Prize. Ever since Barack Obama won it in 2009, Trump has spent nearly 2 decades trying to prove he deserves it more than anyone else on the planet. And in this press gaggle, he took the delusion to a whole new level by claiming that Maria Corina Machado, the brave opposition leader from Venezuela, gave him her Nobel medal. Just stop for a second and process that a woman literally fighting for the survival of democracy in one of the most brutal regimes on earth, supposedly giving her highest honor to a man just because he's had 8 wars. To see just how grotesque this is, look at the clip I've pulled. Pay close attention at how he tells the story. He sounds exactly like a child making up a playground victory to impress his friends.
Yesterday you accepted Maria Machado's Nobel Prize medal. What do you intend to do with it, and why would you want someone else's Nobel Prize?
Well, she offered it to me. I thought it was very nice. She said, you know, you've ended 8 wars, and nobody deserves this prize more than in history.
Do you see the problem here? Let me show you exactly where the blatant lies are buried. First, an obvious fact that anyone with an internet connection can check Maria Corina. Machado has never won the Nobel Peace Prize. Yes, she is a symbol of freedom, and she was awarded the 2024 Prize for Freedom by Liberal International. That is a prestigious human rights award, but it is not a Nobel Prize. Trump, in his desperate thirst for validation, arbitrarily upgraded someone else's award to a Nobel just to claim it as his own. This isn't just ignorance. It is a direct insult to everyone who has actually sacrificed for world peace. Second, look at his logic. She said you've had 8 wars and nobody deserves it more than you. Wait, since when did being involved in 8 wars become the gold standard for the Nobel Peace Prize? That is completely unhinged logic. It exposes Trump's entire mindset regarding power and recognition. To him, the Nobel isn't about stopping bloodshed or promoting human rights. It's a trophy of dominance. He wants to be worshipped as a warrior while simultaneously craving the label of a peacemaker. But there's an even darker layer to this when you look at the political reality of Venezuela in 2026. While Trump is busy bragging about his imaginary Nobel and calling Machado a fine woman, in that very same interview he admits to cutting deals with Delcy Rodriguez, the power player in the Maduro regime that Machado is trying to topple. Trump hid behind the excuse of not wanting to repeat the 2003 Iraq mistake, just so he can keep trading with dictators for oil. This is the true essence of the art of the deal that Trump is so proud of. He exploits freedom fighters like Machado to boost his image at home, but behind their backs he's ready to betray them for a handshake, with oppressors if it brings in cash or energy. He's using Machado as a prop in his own show, turning the pain and sacrifice of the Venezuelan people into a cheap anecdote about a medal. Look at how repulsive this is. A U.S. president standing in front of cameras claiming to possess a non-existent award given by someone he is currently betraying on the global stage. This delusion isn't just funny, it is gutting American credibility. What do our allies see? They see a leader who can't tell fact from fiction, a man ready to turn humanitarian values into a clearance bin trade-off. Trump's obsession with the Nobel is a mirror of his deep-seated insecurity. He doesn't want peace. He wants praise. He doesn't want the truth. He wants a narrative where he is the greatest man in history. His fabricated conversation with Machado about 8 wars is a reminder that for Trump, the world is just a stage where everyone else exists solely to serve his spotlight. And the absolute scariest part, it's the fact that his base will believe it. They will believe he's an 8-war victor hand-delivered a Nobel by the world, while in reality he is torching traditional alliances and making backroom deals with dictators. We are living in an era where the truth is distorted beyond recognition, and this Nobel clip is the ultimate evidence of the moral decay in modern politics. But if you thought the award delusions were the peak of the danger, you were dead wrong. Because immediately after rambling about fake medals, Trump pivoted to something that could fundamentally shake the foundations of American democracy, his hunger to use military force to crush his own people. When a man can't tell a real award from a fantasy, handing him the keys to the Insurrection Act is a nightmare we have to face right now. Now we've come to the final and most terrifying part of this unhinged interview. If threatening NATO allies concerned you, or his Nobel lies made you laugh what Donald Trump just said about deploying the military on US, soil should make your skin crawl. This isn't just social media bluster. It's a blueprint for a military dictatorship in the heart of our democracy in 2026. Trump is openly threatening to trigger the Insurrection Act to deal with what he calls out-of-control states, specifically targeting Minnesota. But before we dive into the danger, look at how shamelessly he twists history to normalize his unconstitutional power grab. Look closely at the numbers he's citing, because these are blatant lies designed to gaslight anyone who hasn't opened a history book.
The trigger for the Insurrection Act in Minnesota, what are you waiting for?
Well, the Insurrection Act, which has been used by 48% of the presidents as of this moment, the Insurrection Act also, if you look at it, I believe it was Bush, the elder Bush, he used it, I think, 28 times. It's been used a lot. And if I needed it, I'd use it. I don't think there's any reason right now to use it. But if I needed it, I'd use it. It's very powerful.
Did you hear that number 28 times? This is exactly why we need an emergency fact check. What's the reality? George H.W. Bush only used the Insurrection Act once in his entire term. That was in 1992 during the Rodney King riots in Los Angeles. Most importantly, he only did so after a desperate official request from the then governor of California. It is not a tool for a president to unilaterally crush political opponents or force power onto states that don't fall in line. Trump turning 1 into 28 isn't an innocent mistake. It's a calculated effort to make the public believe military patrols on our streets are normal, something every president does. We need to understand what the Insurrection Act of 1807 actually is. It's an incredibly sensitive legal loophole that allows the president to deploy federal troops for domestic law enforcement. For over 200 years, American presidents have been extremely cautious about touching it because they know using military firepower against American citizens is the final step toward the collapse of liberty. But Trump, he calls it very powerful, with a look of pure triumph on his face. He doesn't see it as a last resort for a national emergency. He sees it as a power toy to threaten any governor who dares stand up to him. Look at the context in Minnesota that the reporter mentioned. The governor never asked for federal military help. In fact, local authorities are trying to maintain order through civil and democratic means. Yet Trump stands there right outside the White House claiming he's just waiting for a trigger to jump in. This is a direct assault on state sovereignty, guaranteed by the Constitution. If a president can unilaterally send troops into a state without the governor's consent, we are no longer living in a federation. We are living under a centralized military regime. Furthermore, look at the laughable contradiction in his thinking. On one hand, he says he doesn't want to repeat the Iraq mistake by firing all the police and generals which he claims created ISIS. But on the other hand, he's ready to use that same military to suppress Americans in Minnesota or anywhere else. He's using fear of foreign terrorism to justify domestic dictatorship. He's trying to build this image of a law and order. President says from, but in reality, he's destroying the very foundation of the law to establish a law of his own. The real danger here is that Trump is blurring the line between security and political suppression. When he rants about the Golden Dome or great military strength, he isn't just talking about fighting foreign powers. He's implying that this strength will be used to crush any resistance within our own borders. The lies about Bush or the 48% of presidents using the act are just a smokescreen to prepare for a large-scale military intervention if he feels his power is threatened. We are in 2026, and what we just heard wasn't a campaign speech. It was a red alert for the future of the United States. A leader who can't distinguish between a real award and a fake one. A leader ready to abandon NATO allies for an island, and now a leader ready to turn the military against his own people based on fabricated historical numbers. This is the deadliest combination for any democracy's self-delusion paired with a thirst for absolute military power. Folks, this is the moment we have to speak up. Don't let those 28 times or 48% quirky statistics fool you. The truth is always there, and our job is to expose it before these lies become the excuse for irreversible actions. Never forget that the American military swears an oath to the Constitution, not to any individual who wants to turn themselves into a king or a dictator. Trump has shown us his hand, and it's a handful of blood and oppression. Thank you for following this entire breakdown. This is a critical moment in our history, and your vigilance is the only weapon against these lies. Share this video, tell everyone the truth about the Insurrection Act and what Trump is actually plotting. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the next fact check. I'm your partner on this journey for justice and truth. I'll see you in the next video. We will not be silent.